Welcome. This is the July 28th Board of Supervisors public meeting. We're going to go through a zoning update tonight. It's not your typical monthly Board of Supervisors meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so all please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before I turn it over to Chris for an introduction, we're going to have a presentation tonight by Michael Baker International on zoning. Samantha here has done a great presentation for the zoning board, and they'll be providing it tonight for the board and for the residents. The way it'll operate, we expect the presentation to last about an hour, and then we're going to leave up to an hour of questions and comments from the residents. So we plan to end the meeting by 9 o'clock. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris for an introduction.
All right, good evening, members of the board, residents, staff. Chris Himes, Township Manager. Basically serving an introductory purpose here today, but although this says public meeting number 1, it's actually number 2. This is meeting 1 for the board as part of that phase 2 component of public meetings where we had the workshops, 4 of them over the course of the last several months. This is that phase where it's more about getting input and commentary from the Planning Commission and board specifically in order to kind of finalize and continue the process. And then Samantha, I think, is going to touch upon some of those things as well. Just to kind of clarify, it's an hour with board kind of dialogue and discussion because this is their first night really to provide a public recorded transcript of what their opinions are about certain elements of the zoning project. And if you attended the Planning Commission, it's essentially round 2 of that format. So you will definitely have time to speak at the very end of the meeting. But without further ado, just to make sure we can get through all this stuff and get to the public comment, Samantha for Michael Baker. Welcome back. If you like to free flow and walk and talk or everything, but.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha McLean. I'm the project manager for the zoning ordinance and map update for New Garden Township. I work for Michael Baker International. We're a planning and engineering consulting firm that was hired by the township back in the beginning of last year, February, March of last year. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to put actually this here if you don't mind. And we've been working with the township staff, and then a zoning task force of residents and stakeholders in the community on this project for over a year now. So I'm here, not just on behalf of Michael Baker and the work that we've been doing, but really I'm here on behalf of the zoning task force. So your neighbors and your fellow business owners that have been working on this project, and I'm here to present what they've worked on to this date to the Board of Supervisors to ask for some feedback and opinions so we can take it back to the task force and finalize the ordinance. So today, as Chris mentioned, we'll have about an hour presentation that's going to be blocked into a few different segments. First, an overview, just bringing everyone up to speed on the process, goals, zoning map. And then we'll have 3 different topics that have been really the topics that we've heard the most about from residents and stakeholders, which are locations of the mushroom operations in the township and permissions around that, the zoning districts along the Limestone Road corridor between Route 41 and Southwood Road, and then the residential flex district, which is the housing district, a residential district that could accommodate a variety of housing types. So for each of these focus topics, we're going to present some context, what we've heard from the public, and then turn it over to the board to really hear from you so that we can give that feedback back to the zoning task force. And then finally, we'll end with some next steps. Oops. No, it's all right. Cool. Okay, so in terms of the overview, as I mentioned, this process has been going on for a little over a year. We officially launched with the zoning task force back in the summer of 2024, but really this process starts even before that. So in December of 2023, the board released the RFP, the request for proposals for this project, where they outlined certain goals for the zoning update that was based on your 2018 comprehensive plan. So this process is really guided by those goals that were established by the Board of Supervisors and the comprehensive plan, and then other planning efforts that your township has undergone in the last few years. And then it's also, as I mentioned, guided by the zoning task force and the feedback that they've given us. Finally, and I recognize a lot of familiar faces in the room, this has been an iterative and transparent process throughout the last year. On the right-hand side, far right-hand side, you can see all the different public engagement inputs throughout the process. So starting way back in August of last year, almost a year ago now, with our first public outreach meeting, we held a series of 4 public outreach meetings that were really kind of interactive opportunities to provide feedback. And then, as Chris said, we launched our first of 4 kind of public meetings that are more in this traditional format. We launched it with the Planning Commission last June. We're here today with the Board of Supervisors in July. And then there will be 2 additional public meetings, one with the Planning Commission and one with the Board of Supervisors. So this just kind of zooms in a little bit on that last part of the process. Just to make a note, we have June 25th, the Planning Commission public hearing that's crossed out because we've done that already. We're here in July. But there are a lot of more touch points throughout the process. So we'll be taking all this to the task force on August 7th at their meeting to discuss all the feedback we've received from the public, from the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Then we will be issuing a final draft of the zoning ordinance and map. So right now, the draft that's public is the April version, April 2025 version. So there's no other versions out there except that one. So we'll be incorporating edits and having a final draft uploaded in August before the Planning Commission public meeting. And then following the public meeting with the Planning Commission, they send a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Then there's a 45-day public comment period where you are welcome to submit public comment, but it's also sent to Chester County Planning Commission and the school board, I think, for comment prior to the adoption hearing with the Board of Supervisors in late fall. So there's a lot more steps in this process. So something I want to touch on before going into the discussion points is kind of a reminder of the goals. You all on the board are probably very familiar with these because you set them and they are based on the comprehensive plan. But there are really 3 large main goals for this process. Make the ordinance consistent with the existing plans. So that's the comprehensive plan, the Tuff-Kenneman Streetscape Improvement Plan, your official map. The second main goal is to address existing challenges and needs. And this was everything from kind of excessive amounts of existing non-conforming use, by right use of agricultural facilities here in residential districts, a reliance on conditional use hearings and the zoning hearing board for special exceptions and variances. But then it also, some of the other existing challenges and needs kind of also were identified in your existing plans, which is about like lack of flexibility to accomplish your revitalization needs and efforts, constraints around different types of housing options, lack of designated agricultural districts that would provide adequate buffers between heavy agricultural use or industrial grade agricultural use and residential uses, lack of mixed use districts, and zoning misalignment with existing and future infrastructure. So that's a big goal there, lots encompassed in that. And then the third is to apply best practices and standards. So your zoning ordinance is from 1997. A lot has happened in the world of zoning since then. One of the big things that we wanted to make sure of was to review all your uses that are permitted or uses that are defined in your zoning and how they're permitted throughout. Because as you may know, in Pennsylvania, your municipality has to abide by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, which states that every municipality must accommodate for every use under the sun somewhere. So you can't say you don't want to use somewhere, but you can say where that use can go and how it can be developed. So we wanted to make sure that you were covered with that to avoid any kind of curative amendment processes in the future. So we're going to briefly go through the proposed zoning map, but I did just want to provide kind of a comparison. On the website, we have a interactive slider map that allows you to kind of zoom in, and you can easily go between the two maps, the existing and the proposed. We do have the same amount of districts in the proposed zoning map. So you have 10 now. We are proposing 10 districts. But what we're doing is we're trying to be a little bit more intentional about the geographies and then also the permissions within them. So looking at how to meet the goals that we just outlined within each of these districts. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the districts or sets of districts and how it accomplishes the goals that you set out. So there are 10 zoning districts, there are 4 mixed-use districts, 3 residential districts, and 3 special districts. When we were going through this process, we were considering existing uses and form because we don't want to create more nonconformities in the areas that you want to see that type of use. We also looked at desired uses and form based on your goals in the comprehensive plan, and then existing infrastructure. So starting with the mixed-use districts, there are 4 mixed-use districts. Starting with the innovation district, this is kind of your most flexible district. It's really meant to respond to market needs and accommodate a diverse range of uses. So commercial, industrial, recreational, residential, if that's what the demand is, kind of in more of like a campus feel or town center type feel. The mixed use corridor, which is primarily along Gap Newport Road or Route 41, is really your mixed use commercial, office, residential corridor that can be accessible by vehicle, but nearby to some of the residential areas in the township. One thing that was a big focus of the comprehensive plan was really looking at your corridors and making sure that they were the highest and best uses were along them. And then you have 2 mixed use districts kind of near Tough Kenneman. The village center being the area around the core of Tough Kenneman and expanding out. That's really where we want to see the most like walkable form, neighborhood scale with mixing of houses, service, commercial uses. And then your village gateway is the darker red that extends out from either side of Tough Kenneman. And this really provides a transition from your mixed-use automobile-oriented kind of mixed-use corridor towards your walkable Tough Kenneman Village Center. So your mixed-use districts are making your ordinance consistent with your existing plans, addressing the lack of flexibility that you currently have with revitalization efforts, and your lack of mixed use, planned use, and other blended use districts. There are 3 residential districts that are being proposed. They are in order of kind of intensity or density. The first being residential flex. It's that gold color on the map. It's really focused between the 2 corridors, main corridors in your township, Baltimore Pike and Gap Newport. This is really designed to accommodate a diversity of housing types. So especially those housing types between like a single family detached home and an apartment complex. So we're looking at kind of the attached single family, small scale, multifamily. Residential medium density, these are a lot of your existing residential neighborhoods that are primarily single family, detached, some attached with smaller lot sizes. And then the tan colors, your residential low density, larger lots, single family detached that you see a lot in the south of the township, primarily because of the natural resources that are there and then also infrastructure. So the residential districts and where they are and what they accommodate address the following goals. So your current constraints around housing within the low and medium density residential districts, zoning misalignment between existing and future infrastructure, and then excessive amounts of existing non-conforming use. And then finally, your special districts, the airport districts, self-explanatory. It's around your New Garden Airport. The enterprise district, that district in purple, is really supposed to be like an industrial type district that would contribute to economic growth, job creation, supporting kind of commercial opportunities, industrial grade agricultural opportunities, et cetera. And then your parks and open space, which are like the publicly owned parks and open space or the golf course. So these districts, in particular, the enterprise district, really addresses that challenge that you have right now of a lot of by right use of agricultural facilities or existing non-conforming uses in your residential districts. And the enterprise district is designed to have buffers around it to provide that buffer between uses that have a lot of nuisance or impact on surrounding uses. So tried to get through that quickly so we could get to conversation, but I know that that was quick. Are there any questions before we go into the first topic?
We're going to have questions from the residents at the very end, okay? And I will ask if people can keep their side conversations to a minimum. If you want to have a conversation, please step outside the meeting room, but it's very disruptive to the residents and to the speaker if people are having side conversations. I can hear some side conversations up here, so please keep those to a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the first topic that we wanted to discuss with you, and I should say, if there are other topics that you want to discuss, please bring them up at the end. These are just the three that we've heard the most about and that the task force really needs some guidance on. So the first is about the mushroom operations in the township and the enterprise district. So right now, the proposed ordinance and map would permit agricultural operations, mushroom related, so mushroom operations, only in that enterprise district, so that area in purple. We located that district there for a few reasons. You know, it's nearby to the Route 41 corridor. There's already existing concentration of those operations, and it's removed from some of the more residential areas. And it's responding to those goals that we've gone over a lot already. Something to note is while there are a lot of mushroom operations throughout the township right now, a lot of them are existing non-conforming uses because a lot of them are located in the R1 district. So that's just something to keep in mind. So in terms of the public feedback that we've gotten on this topic is, you know, we've heard from lots of people, there's already lots of existing mushroom operations outside of the proposed zoning district. What is the impact of, or for them? We have received some feedback about some of our use definitions around mushroom operations. Right now we had composting only as an accessory to mushroom production. We have discussed this with the task force, and the task force is in agreement that we can have mushroom composting or composting as a standalone use. We also received some feedback about including additional use definitions about ancillary mushroom service provider uses, which is something that makes a lot of sense to us. But we've also heard some concerns about the geography of the enterprise district and a desire to have that expanded a little bit more, especially south of Star Road. So for each of these topics, our team took in the feedback, reviewed it based on our experience and then also the goals of the township. And we are providing a recommendation just as a starting point for conversation. It's not a definitive, you know, this is what we're doing. But, you know, our recommendation in taking all of this in is that we definitely want to revise the use definitions to accommodate mushroom service providers and that composting primary use, principal use, But we are not recommending any edits to the existing use permissions in other districts for operations, for mushroom operations, nor are we recommending edits to the boundaries of the enterprise district for 3 different reasons. One, this is really, the map is allowing for the continued operations of these mushroom operations through non-conforming use, and then continued and expanded use within the enterprise district. And many of those operations are currently non-conforming as they are, so it's not representing a huge change. And then by designating a specific area, a specific district for these uses, the township is able to minimize the use-based nuisances on residential areas, which was a big goal of the township and in the comprehensive plan. And then finally, you know, with looking at zoning boundaries, when possible and when they make sense, we try to use roadways to have a little bit more enforceable boundaries of those districts. So with that, I'd love to hear, I think the zoning task force would love to hear kind of your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, you want me to do this now, or do you want me to go through my whole list of questions? I mean, I can do it all once we go through your presentation, that's fine. Because a lot of them tie together as a
Okay.
whole.
I defer to you. We wanted to have these breaks in the presentation so that, you know, at the end, you're not like, you know, trying to get your thoughts out on 3 different topics. But if there are any thoughts particularly on this issue, we'd love to hear them now.
No, that's fine. I'll be okay waiting till the end.
Okay.
I support the decision to not expand past Star Road for mushroom operations, so just want to make that known.
What's the process for if we decide to add it later? So let's say we go through this, then we decide that we want to go south of Star Road for whatever reason. Is that just a simple amendment, or is it a whole?
It,
Be a map
it would be a map amendment, which
Okay. I think that's 3 of us that agree.
any other?
Samantha, is there anything this task force specifically wanted us to address on this particular topic?
I think primarily like your thoughts on this recommendation, because we're going to be taking, you know, this to the task force and say, you know, we've heard from the public, here's what the public's saying, here's what the planning commission said, like, and then here's what the board is saying, just to provide then some guidance in terms of how to move forward, or if to make edits, or if not to. Okay. Okay, well, we can come back to that too. But focus topic number 2, this is looking at the zoning districts around Limestone Road, in that area in the box here between Route 41 and Southwood. So this is an area that the task force has looked at a lot, and they're balancing a lot of different factors. So they're balancing township goals, the impact on surrounding property owners, but also the rights of the existing property owners. So not taking away any development rights from the property owners that are currently in the Unified Development District. And then also they're looking at consistency with surrounding land use. So they've been considering 2 different scenarios that we're going to present to you. But I do want to situate everyone to the existing conditions. So this is a zoomed in map, aerial imagery on the right, your existing zoning on the left. So the majority of the parcels in this area abut Limestone Road, Southwood Road, and Route 41, they are zoned in that blue as highway commercial. Everything in gray is that Unified Development District. So in the UD district, it permits a variety of uses, including industrial and commercial uses. Right now, the existing land uses that are in that area are kind of a mix, some limited residential, mushroom production, storage, manufacturing, auto repair, and lumber supply, kind of a hodgepodge. So there are 2 different scenarios that we're looking at. On the left-hand side, this is a scenario that is on the most recent version of the zoning map. So if you look at the, I think, April 11th version of the zoning map, this is what you'll see, where we have a mixed-use corridor kind of extending from the main corridor on Route 41 down Limestone Road. And then you have that gold color kind of behind, which is that residential flex. So a residential district that would permit a variety of housing types. On the right-hand side, we have a scenario that maintains the existing zoning maps, specifically the Unified Development District's flexibility of uses more than our current iteration. So the Innovation District, as we discussed earlier, a large portion near the airport, we're proposing to be zoned that would allow for a mix of uses, industrial, commercial, some residential, and the intent of this district is really to be more of like a larger scale campus type facility that would bring employment opportunities to the township rather than that like mixed use kind of service commercial retail. So those are the two scenarios that the task force has been considering. We also brought these scenarios to the public in May during our last public outreach meeting and asked for some feedback, and there wasn't an overwhelming decision on scenario 1 or 2. But we have heard loud and clear about concerns on traffic and transportation infrastructure, concerns about the impact of the mixed use corridor or the innovation districts on the residential areas. But we've also heard on the other side of things that some residents have expressed the need for more proximate services, especially like medical services that they might need to go to something that's in state and not be able to cross the border. And then we've heard from property owners in that area that want the desire to be able to sell and develop their property as they are able to right now in the Unified Development District. So our recommendation is scenario 2, using the Innovation District in that area. We think it maintains the existing zoning maps flexibility of uses, preserving the property owner's rights. It's a lower impact in general, kind of use in that mixed use corridor, which would permit more like frequent traffic and uses. And then it also supports the township's goal of kind of the lack of mixed use, planned use, other blended zoning districts. So any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I won't have to come back. I agree with the Innovation District in that area. Of course, I would defer and hear what our constituents say, but I think that makes the most sense with what's on the ground and the potential in the future.
Can you speak to what residential density would be allowed should a commercial or campus facility not be feasible there?
Yes, just off the top of my head, in terms of, I can't necessarily speak right now to like dwelling units per acre, but housing types I can talk to. So the Innovation District would allow kind of the full gamut of housing types, everything from, single family detached is something actually we're considering not including in that district, but everything from townhouses, twins, triplexes, quadplexes, up to, multifamily apartment. However, as I think we all know, just because you permit something doesn't mean it just can happen, right? It's dependent on a lot of factors, including utilities and all of that. But we did really want to make that district as flexible as possible because, especially near the airport too, it's a great swath of land, accessible via the corridors, and we want it to be able to be developed to market demand.
And I don't think that you would be able to speak to this, but maybe Chris could, in terms of, sorry to jump spot, but in terms of, this would be the southern end of the choke point, and should something large enough come along, would we be able to, with the traffic, with the 209 study, be able to kind of force improvements there, or is that just like another kind of, is that?
You're talking about addressing the interchange?
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
just kind of like a no
So
man's?
it's kind of twofold. One is yes, that interchange is a focus. Even since the last public meeting on Monday, I've already reached out to our transportation engineer, Bowman Engineering, as well as membership from SAVE. So there is like a current way to just start narrowing in a hyper focus of just driving PennDOT to the table with that. Would this be a catalytic element on top of that? Yes. I mean, it would have to be. Plus developers improvements, because if you want to go back to the map, I can't remember how much it kind of touches up in that area, but it does pretty much contiguously kind of line on Lawrence and on Route 41. So with Act 209 now in place, that derives that ability to do that. So long-winded answer, more so of saying yes on multiple fronts.
Okay, good. Thank you.
One quick follow-up. Follow-up question on that, in the Innovation District. And I know we're not through the Saldo changes yet, but any idea of density per acre for strictly residential use? And would there be bonuses for mixed use? Those are just thoughts I'm throwing out there.
So right now, as it's proposed and written for the Innovation District, we do not have any requirements of a certain mix type. To be as flexible as possible. However, if there is a desire, we can look at that. It's really hard to get that equation right and make it work. And then actually for the mixed, I think for all of our districts, we're kind of getting away from the density per acre and letting the other form regulations and dimensional regulations dictate that, right? So we already have things like setback and building height and uses that are permitted. So we're kind of letting that. And then parking. All these other factors that go into development. So we're kind of trying to take away something that can already be regulated through another use or another regulation. If that makes sense.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. So focus topic 3 is on the residential flex district. So that area in gold, the township, you all have identified existing challenge in your existing residential districts to achieve the missing middle housing initiatives. So that missing middle being, everything between, so not a single family detached and not a large apartment building, but that everything kind of in between, more attainable kind of housing types. Your comprehensive plan strategy there is a comprehensive plan strategy that says to permit a greater variety of housing options in village type settings on parcels adjoining the village core. So as you can see, we are really focusing the residential flex, extending from Tough Kenneman, but also abutting kind of the mixed use corridor that's going to have a lot of amenities or could accommodate a lot of amenities in some of the existing residential areas. This is also, we chose this area to also align with existing infrastructure or kind of where it would be easier being used loosely here to extend sewer compared to say like the south of the township, which would be very difficult. This also supports the changing demographic and trends and needs that the Chester County Planning Commission has identified for the county and New Garden. So they've seen population and households population growing and households in the county growing. But while population is increasing, median household size is decreasing. So more people, but in smaller households. So a household of 2 people needs a very different housing type than a household of 4 people. And that there's a mismatch of that. They've seen an increasing housing demand for smaller households and more units, and limited housing supply in the county is really one of the main contributors to the rising housing prices. So in terms of the residential flex district or permitting a variety of housing types in this district, we've heard concerns about the impact on the character of the township, some of the areas of the township being very rural in nature. We've also heard concerns about the impact on property values, on infrastructure and natural resources. But then on the flip side, we've also heard support and the need for broadening available housing in the township. So at this point, our team is not recommending any edits to this residential flex area for the following reasons. It's consistent with the goals that were set forth by the township. It addresses the housing needs identified by the township and the county, and then it also is aligning with existing and nearby infrastructure in terms of the geography of it. So with that, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have.
So for me, the residential flex is probably the least that I would make changes to, that I have notes for. So I'm somewhat on the same page there. I'm not sure what the comments were about the natural resource, because they would come under the natural resource protection ordinance. In that area, they're limited, other than the steep slopes on the northern side. There isn't a lot of excessive amount of groundwater when you get down along the railroad tracks. I mean, you don't have to dig too far and you're gonna find some serious aquifers there. So I think the resources are going to reduce the density in that particular highlighted area, as well as someone in Tufkenham.
And to that point, I think something that's really important to know is if you're looking at the use table and you see a use permitted by right, it doesn't mean that it's permitted by right without any regulation. So in terms of what you mentioned about the natural resources article, they would have to abide by that parking, the dimensional regulations. So there's a lot to go through. And I think that was a great point about the natural resources. Any other thoughts here? Okay, going through this quickly. I do know you had some additional questions, but I'll end with some next steps and then just open it up for conversation, if that's okay with the chair. So in terms of next steps, this is kind of reiterating what we showed earlier. Our task force meeting is on August 7th. We do post the recordings and meeting summaries of all those meetings on the website. So that we aim to post it by the end of the next day following the meeting. So that will be up by August 8th. Following that meeting, we don't have a date set right now, but we will publicize it as soon as we're able to know our workload. We'll have the updated draft, or what we'll call the final draft of the zoning ordinance and map, and we'll release that on the website prior to the Planning Commission public meeting, which will be August 27th during their regularly occurring meeting. Following that, and their recommendation to the board, there will be a 45-day public comment period. We'll share it with the Chester County Planning Commission, and then there's an opportunity for anyone to submit public comment prior to the Board of Supervisors public hearing, which will be held after that 45-day public comment period in the fall. Everything in green is kind of that part of the official adoption process. That's kind of the bare minimum required by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. So these meetings, the one with the Planning Commission and this meeting tonight, is really helpful because we're able to have these discussions before kind of decisions need to be made. So with that, just ending, the website, it has a wealth of resources. That's a QR code to the website link. And then any questions can be directed to the township. So that is the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Okay, if you can go back to focus point, the topic number 1, which was around page 21, maybe. Yes, okay. The existing shaded map of the enterprise district, I truly believe that Star Road is the dividing fact. If you go back 10, maybe 12 years ago, we had looked at an agriculture overlay for that district and it didn't come, it was never adopted. That is your most intense agriculture area within the township. And at some point there has to be a dividing. If you look to the right, which would be to the east, the straight line that comes down from 41, there's a natural buffer there that helps define the residential and the agriculture uses. And for me, I mean, Star Road is a divider. Again, I would certainly keep an open mind in later if there's an issue or a proposed use, there could be a map amendment. think the board is open to that. At least I know I'm open to it. So that was my comments on that one.
Thank you.
On the uses, individual uses, so I'm a little confused if the low density is, the residential low density. If I read through the permitted uses there, it's manufactured housing, things that I would think in my mind that should be in the higher density residential zone. And in looking at the map, most of your natural resource protection ordinance is applicable in that shaded area for the low density. So by default, again, it's not going to happen there. But I'm just kind of curious why there was manufactured housing, and then not getting into the definitions of manufactured housing. Are we talking about tiny homes? Is there any provisions in there for that?
So for your first question, the reason we thought it would be appropriate to permit a manufactured home in the residential low density is essentially if it is not within a dense manufactured home community, it really functions as a single family detached home. So when there is a manufactured home community, there's a lot in the saldo that goes into that that might make the communities maybe more difficult to build there. But a single, on a lot, a manufactured home would function as a single family home. So that's why we have it permitted right now, I believe by right. It is also, if I'm remembering correctly, and I can grab.
Is it
It is permitted in medium density and then.
in the other two
Yes.
districts? Yes.
Yeah. In terms of tiny home, I would need to take a look at the definition. It's something that we can look into. There might be, maybe Winnie might know this better than I do, but I believe that there are some kind of regulations around like tiny homes, especially like if there's any kind of wheel accessory to it, and like whether it's a manufactured home or a mobile kind of recreational kind of home. So we could look into adding a definition, but I don't think that there would be anything. We don't have any like size requirements for manufactured homes.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Sure. Okay. We can add a size, and I think we do make it very clear about like the wheels being on it or off of it. So.
Yeah, and then in the same district, is livestock permitted in the low density?
So right now in the existing or in the proposed draft from April 2025, it is permitted as a special exception. So a special exception is a permitted use, but it's permitted by special exception, which means it goes to the zoning hearing board. And then there are criteria that the zoning hearing board looks at to make a decision on whether it's approved or not. Uses that are permitted by special exception are often uses that might have kind of higher intensity impacts on the surrounding property and just want a heightened level of review. That would apply, that special exception use would apply if there is someone that was coming in and proposing a new use, a use that's not there right now, or proposing to expand an existing non-conforming use beyond what is permitted in the code as a non-conforming use. So right now, if you have a use that's existing right now, and permitted under the existing zoning, and then you could continue with that use and even expand it up to, I think, 25% without having to seek, go through a special exception process.
Mhm.
But that's something I will say, the Planning Commission, when they heard public feedback, that was a request of the Planning Commission that the zoning task force take a closer look at the different types of agricultural uses and where they're permitted.
Yeah.
And how they are permitted.
And then that would bring me to my next point, and I know we have a meeting on existing non-conforming, but if in fact the livestock is not permitted or is permitted by special exception, if I'm an existing non-conforming, is that going to be documented as part of the adoption? And I'll give you an example. If you look at our natural resource protection ordinance, there's maps in there. If you cut all the trees down, they're still considered woodlands. Promise you.
So in the non-conform, and I'm gonna grab it real quick so I don't misspeak. In the non-conforming uses or the non-conforming article, there is a specific stipulation regarding that it has to be a documented use. But I think there is a question. I don't think that is on the burden of the township. It is on the burden of the property owner to prove that it is an existing non-conforming use, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there should be a specific time frame for them to bring that to the township and get it documented, I believe.
That's something I defer to the
Yeah.
township on. It's not in the existing ordinance, but
And in Chester County, there's like this many that have it. Yeah, but this is really such a change that I think it's important that we do document the existing non-conforming uses. So somehow we have to get through that hurdle and come up with a plan, and that may be me talking to our team to do that and come up with somehow to record that.
sure. So as we have right now in this, on page 273 of the ordinance in Article 12, nonconformities, section 1201, general regs, section B, there is something about documentation of legal nonconformance. And right now, as it stands, it says it shall be the right of the landowner to provide evidence of the legal nonconformance at the request of the landowner and based on evidence provided to the zoning officer as authorized by the Board of Supervisors. The zoning officer shall issue a certificate of nonconformance, which shall be for the purpose of ensuring to the owner the right to continue a nonconforming building or use. If no documented evidence is produced, it shall be assumed that the nonconforming use is not a pre-existing condition. So that's currently, but we can certainly, if that's an area that we can look into it a little more, we can.
Okay, and then in any of the residential, is there any aspect for mixed use in that area?
Yes, there is. So definitely in the residential flex, that's the area that would permit kind of the greatest range of mixed use. A lot of the uses in those areas, I'm just pulling up the use table now, are those commercial or service uses that are more like neighborhood serving and not meant to necessarily be like a regional or even township-wide pull. So I'm just looking at it real quick. Residential flex, like daycare right now, an event venue by conditional use, right? Because there's a lot of factors there. A neighborhood service use. So that's a use that's in a building that's 3,000 square feet or less, that isn't otherwise defined as a separate use. So let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke there. That's Village Center. But yes, so obviously as you go down in the intensity or density of the districts, it becomes fewer and fewer. And also the types change, right? So like a lot of in the low density, I think the agricultural uses like crop farming or raising of livestock, I think for low density and medium density, I don't believe we have it for residential flex. So we were trying to really think of the purpose of those districts.
Okay. In looking at some of the uses that are in the other districts, the Gateway, the Enterprise, the Innovation, and even in the Village, in my opinion, I think there needs to be more of a mixed, because I'm pretty sure there's more mixed uses that are on the ground currently that maybe they're not being assessed properly, or they've not been documented, but they've been there for years. And I think as part of this, it's probably gonna not be good for some people that have commercial uses, because their assessment may go up. Because, and that's a benefit for the taxpayers here, because we're not collecting the proper assessment on certain parcels. But I do think there needs to be some broader terms and broader uses, especially in the mixed use districts. So in one that I read, and I'll just give you a brief example, if I go to a doctor's office, I should be able to go next door and get my nails done
Absolutely.
or get coffee. And I didn't connect the dots, and maybe it's just me. The document is overwhelming. It's close to 400 pages. If you print it out in a font that an old guy can read, it's 400 pages, but you have to read through it and kind of understand it. And then we have the whole subdivision and land development that has to melt into that, because things go back and forth between zoning, the section 200 and section 170. And that's a whole nother process, but,
If I could respond to kind of the you know, being able to get your nails done or get a
Yes.
coffee or whatever. So, you are right. You don't see coffee shop as a defined use, because it is covered under, the or service neighborhood use or service general use, depending on the size of the building. So part of this is, a lot of times what makes a place feel a certain way isn't necessarily because of like, oh, there's a coffee shop but is permitted but not a hair salon or something.
Right.
It's because of the form, right? So we're saying like in the in like village center, it might be more appropriate to have those smaller footprint buildings, and it doesn't matter really what's in them, but it's the mix of uses. However, for those uses that have impacts that are a little higher than a coffee shop or nail salon, we pull them out as individual uses with a definition, because we want them to be treated separately, if that makes sense.
it does, yes.
Okay, same with retail. We have like retail general and retail neighborhood, depending on the size, but then retail that, like for example, we pull out,
Right.
like cigarette and vaporizer store, because we want that regulated in a different way than a coffee shop. That makes,
No,
Okay.
that certainly makes sense. And then, in the corridors, Route 41, even Route 7, and Baltimore Pike, potentially Newark Road, at least between 41 and the bypass, I question whether we're limiting ourselves to potential for more commercial uses. And I'm not talking about like Walmart or anything like that. It's just, are there little manufacturing places that may land here? Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but if we zone it and it gets built residential, there's no chance of it happening. Those are my concerns in general.
I see what you mean. So looking at potentially, right now, we don't have a designated use mix for some of those corridors. Maybe we should look into considering like the pros and cons of that approach for those corridors, so it doesn't get eaten up just by residential.
Yeah, and I don't know, Winnie, can some of that go in? I mean, zoning should dictate the use. So it should be in the section 200 for the zoning ordinance, not in the land development.
Some things that we might want to have some flexibility on. Sorry, some things that we might want to have some flexibility on are better if we can put them in the subdivision ordinance, because there can be waivers there. The zoning ordinance is fixed. If it's not provided, it's not provided. So, so it really is use, but we have expanded that to be setbacks and those things.
So that may be for the later or the second
Discuss
part of
that,
that.
yeah.
No, this is good, and this has been very helpful and eye-opening for me. hats off to your team, to the township staff, because this is a very, very, very comprehensive overview of the township, period. And we've taken bits and pieces at a time and we've changed things. And what happens when you do that is the zoning is in conflict with the comprehensive plan and so on. It's in conflict with the land development. And then there are so many definitions that are left up to interpretation. So, and in today's world, that deemed approval is most scary to townships, your neighbors. You don't want that deemed approval next to you. So that's why we need to define it. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions for Samantha from the board?
Yeah. One of the concerns of the residents has been maintaining the character of the township. Could you speak to the historic ordinance overlay that you've been working on to kind of maintain that sort of thing?
Sure. So your current ordinance has a historic preservation article, Article 5, and this is actually an article that is still kind of under construction compared to all the other articles that are in a firmer shape. And that's because we've been working a lot with the Historical Commission to get it in a place that makes sense. So right now, your historic preservation ordinance is for any properties that are on your designated historic properties list. I do not know how many properties off the top of my head. You may know. Okay, thank you. So if you have property on that list and you are doing any certain kinds of changes to that impact the exterior or proposing, say, like a demolition, you would have to abide by that article. And something that we've been looking at in a lot of detail is kind of that process for demolition, because right now it's not as clear and like a lot is left up in the air. So we're looking at how to make that a little stronger, and then also have like a process and a definition for demolition by neglect. So if you just leave your property to neglect, that's still, considered, there's still a process for that. There is in the ordinance right now, in the draft ordinance, there is a historic preservation chapter. A lot of this is what you currently have, and we're working on making it stronger with the Historical Commission right now. So in the final draft plan, you'll be seeing that. But in terms of, there are a lot of other properties that contribute to the character of the township that aren't necessarily designated as historic. And one of the first steps we took in this process was looking at each of the areas of the township and understanding the character and wanting to make sure that our dimensional regulations or our form regulations would continue with that look and feel of the existing. So even if it's not a designated property, there's still, there's a open lot or something and something's built in it, it should still be kind of within the character of that area. I hope that answers it.
Thank you.
I agree with Steve's comments.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you, Samantha. You're right on schedule. Now we'll turn to the residents portion of the meeting. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks to those who attended the working sessions. I think it was very educational for the residents to go to the working sessions. So what I'll ask you to do is, for anybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment, please come up to the microphone here in front of the board. If you have a question for the board or for Samantha or for the staff, Chris, feel free to come up. I do have one person that already expressed an interest, PG Barbera. So if you want to come up first, PG, and then anybody after that, please line up. I will ask though, for the board meetings, we do have a time limit of 3 minutes. I'll ask you to keep your questions or your comments to 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, if we have time after everybody gets a chance to speak, feel free to come back up again. Again, we want to keep this to an hour, so we want to cut it off by 9 if we're not done by then. So It's all yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I live in Brittany Hills across the street. My concern here is more for the development and the presentation that occurred at the last meeting at White Clay Point, which is going to be one of those mixed use areas or once again, we're concerned about the introduction of the language about stadium arena, which some people are now calling a youth facility. I just want to come back here and reiterate, that we live across the street. Obviously, we have more of a vested interest in keeping the quiet and the nature and just the feel of the community. We certainly wouldn't like anything that feels like Taylor Swift concerts going on every night or every weekend. We'd certainly like to keep it nice and quiet. And maybe if you could introduce something not with a retractable roof, something that's enclosed, something like the Hockessin Athletic Club, HAC in Hockessin. And everybody knows that there aren't enough primary care physicians in the area. So mixed use, maybe we can start incorporating some medical facilities in the area, some of the nails or whatever that you wanted, Steve. Things like that, and just to pay attention to the fact that the roads are very narrow, the infrastructure is not available on those roads, the smell, the noise, the traffic that is already going on that street. I know that everyone makes it sound as if the developer is going to come in and do all kinds of wonderful things, expanding the road, this, that, and the next thing. But that probably needs to be the first thing that they actually obligate themselves to, because right now that road, Newport Gap Road, is a nightmare. Just to keep those things in mind. I know that there's a lot of conversations about having more housing in the area. From the very first meeting that I came to when I moved to the area a year ago, it's difficult to comprehend that a lot of people are going to want to come to this area without us trying to do something about the mushroom stench. And I know there's nothing we can do about that, but there's probably something that we need to do about that to encourage people to come to our area. Those people that are going to be paying taxes. Residential does deliver a lot of money in taxes. So I've pretty much covered everything. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rona Devane. I'm here on behalf of the Estates of Harrogate, board member. We're hearing a lot about conforming use, non-conforming use. And the concern is not about what might be allowed as much as it is of how it might be allowed. And the big change that we're seeing here, which we believe, and there has been a lot of feedback, and I have not heard that mentioned, is the liberal permitted use by right. And that is the problem, is that this board is giving up the ability to review, and the zoning hearing board as well. We're giving up that right, except for certain things that are in the code. But right now, we're talking about that limestone district, okay? There are things that are permitted, but they are not permitted by right. And that is what we feel needs to be changed. So in these districts, this liberal use of that, which would allow a gas station, which has tremendous possibilities of negative impact to, especially to close homeowners. Harlow Point, I don't live in Harlow Point, but they're right there. Sound, noise, environmental, traffic, that needs a more review. It needs more scrutiny. A wind energy system, that could have a lot of impact. So that's the first thing. If you can change that, Samantha, okay? If you can remove the liberal and, quite frankly, it seems irresponsible, widespread permitted use, you will get buy-in from the residents. And there is a feeling that these meetings and the public comments, they're happening, but does it matter? we're expressing our concerns. People are doing it in writing. People are here. I was here Wednesday as well. And it feels like, quite frankly, we don't care. We're here, we're going through the requirements, and then you're just doing it. And so I think that's probably a wider concern. The last concern is a greater for the whole township. It does have a rural nature. Greater than 45% increase in housing units does not seem prudent, and it certainly doesn't seem prudent to do it in big dumps. So if we were to do it, increase 20%, how is it working? How are the roads working? But to put in these mass developments, that's concerning. So the big takeaway is reduce that permitted use. I will tell you, I will personally work with you to get, there's some big communities there, you know what they are, okay? To get buy-in from the residents, that is what needs to be done. You need to remove that permitted by right use in order to satisfy the residents. Thank you.
If I can just respond to that, this will be a brief lecture in constitutional law and zoning law. Right? The U.S. Constitution gives us the right to life, liberty, and property. In 1926, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision in Euclid versus Amber, which said that zoning is a limitation of that right. So our Constitution gives us a right to use our property the way we want it. Almost 100 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court said, except zoning can make some control over that. The law also says that this township has to provide for every legitimate use. So you're saying don't allow all these things?
No.
They can't.
No. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying don't allow it by right, especially in that area where there's been the concerns. And you do not, by law, need to do that. You do need by law, and I am an attorney as well, to allow every use. We talked about the area by the airport. So maybe that's where the pawn shops are, okay?
Is
But-
what you're saying not to allow every use in as many districts?
No, I'm saying, well, we are, if you look at the zoning, the proposed zoning map, okay, there are differences between the districts, right? We allow the pawn shops here, we allow the gas stations here, we allow this kind of housing here. You can determine what different districts will allow that. What I am saying is, allowing it is okay, make it by special exception, make it by conditional use, not by permitted by right. That does not need to be allowed. And that is what we're asking. Remove that permitted by right. We're not
For
saying,
what uses?
well, I can give you the list. You want me to go through the list in the
only
Innovation
have-
District? I'm trying to be respectful of
Yeah,
the
you're
time.
tying this up, no.
Yeah.
But then maybe submit a list to Samantha, yeah.
I will tell you, I don't know if they're having email problems, but I personally have emailed codes at codes at New Garden with a question, and I did not receive a response. And so I'm not super confident about that, and I do think it should be, maybe public too. It needs to be included. We have your email. We can also copy codes at New Garden, and I'm happy to send it to all of the supervisors as well. Okay.
Hi, my name is Donna Hoke, and I have lived here 28 days. So this is all very new to me. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But we do happen to live in the middle of the gold zone. So my ears are peaked when it's not up anymore, but it was a few minutes ago. So I just want to bring a little perspective from where I just moved from. So I just moved from Delaware, literally 6 miles as the crow flies in, Hocus and Pike Creek area. But it's a million miles away from the chaos here. And already in less than 30 days, my blood pressure has gone down 10 points. Just want to throw that out there. I owned a business in Newark, Delaware for 33 years. And during that time, I watched progress unfold. Zoning and development, all for the sake of improvement. A little is nice, absolutely. But over time, I watched it line the pockets of developers and strip the locals of peace. It changed the complexion of the area completely. A town that we once loved is now a place of disdain, where no one wants to visit, no one wants to find a place to park or to deal with the traffic headaches. That's not progress, it's destruction. It may benefit a few for a while, but in the long run, it can be a disaster. The growth that occurs when rezoning happens is like boiling a frog. It happens slowly at first, and then it's too late. You can't turn back. Once Pandora leaves her box, she's never going back. Thank you.
I'm glad you were ahead of me. Barkley Hoops, 177 Walnut Run Road. This is what I thought about on Sunday, 27th. I started to come into these meetings on rezoning sometime late winter, early spring. And I've read the comprehensive plan several times. Got up 2 o'clock this morning and reviewed it, and was still reviewing before it came here. Okay, got some recommendations. On Sunday, early in the morning after doing my work, I came up with this. The township has a good connect with the ag community. I'll give you the reasons. I have reviewed that comprehensive plan of 218 more than most. It is very, very receptive to agriculture. There are, according to the comprehensive plan, 3 maps and 3 things you can get onto. 3,400, almost 3,500 acres is still in agriculture. That's 33% or so of this land. 18% of this township's in trees. They like to take a picture off Landenberg Road across Allen Farms and Hooks Farm, and that's tier 1. You want to protect the best soils we got, and believe me, we got them. Just look at the corn. But there's one thing that's left out. How do you preserve the farmer? I got some recommendations, and this is all positive to you. I've been asking who's on the task force, but I found out by going on the internet Sunday, I think it was. I got on there just by chance on around second month of this year of a Zoom with the task force, and I've got their names. Tonight, just before it came, I finished finding out who they were. Not going to go over it because you know. My point is, they're all qualified. How many years have they lived in a township? How many years have they done business? How much depth do they have in the total knowledge of this township? You can answer that. But they're qualified people. I got one recommendation for you, maybe 2 or 3. I would like to see Steve Alabama put on that task force. He doesn't have this set up with me. I looked in there, who was on the township board when that 218 was put in, and who was on the planning committee. He wasn't on the planning commission then, but he knows more than most. He was a supervisor, and he was also on that comprehensive plan. We have no depth in that task force at all of the real depth of this community. He needs to be on. The second recommendation is we're supposed to be, according to the comprehensive plan, communicating with agriculture. I would make another recommendation before the planning commission and township supervisors. Let's bring the ag community in. Let's sit down and talk. Number 2, 3 or 4, I don't know where I am now. And 1993, my wife and I sold the development rights on our farm of 56 acres, no more than that, to the state of Pennsylvania. To do that, I had to be in an ag security area. Carol Pratt and I in the early 80s were the first people to organize that. And I gave the information to Steve just the other day because I saved a good portion of my 2006 and 7 supervisor stuff. The rest is in archives here someplace. Gave it to him. In 07, Warren Reynolds tried to put 53 acres in, which he got in. We had almost 1,500 acres in an ag security area in this township in 07. Now, that, if you understand what that means, that overlay goes over any zone in this township. We got rights. Where are our ag rights now? I want to know. Somebody's going to tell me. I'll leave that to the side.
Barclay, can I just pause you for a second? I just want to see if anybody else has comments, and then I'll ask you to come back up with you. Yep.
Unheard wrong.
Okay, thank you. If anybody else has any comments, otherwise Barclay can keep going.
Darn right.
I'm going to let him talk, but I just want other people to get the opportunity. I promise I will let him speak again. I promise.
That kind of a guy. Set the pace.
Hi, my name is Peter Mrozinski. I live at 309 Hyde Park. The first point is a point I've raised before about Limestone Road. And I believe it was heard, and I appreciate that, because your zoning now says for the, can't remember the term, innovation. I knew it started with an I. And I appreciate the reason for doing that. Your stated reason was that it would be kind of a dedicated site where there wouldn't be as much daytime traffic going in and out. Except getting back to Rona's point, I did look at the permitted uses for Innovation District, and you can put a gas station there, you can put a restaurant there, you can put a liquor store there, you could put a outdoor, I think even the car dealer was mentioned. So those, unless I read that wrong, they all had little P's next to them for innovation. So that, I saw the reason doing it. I thought that was, I liked that you were doing that. But then when I read the specifics, it all fell apart again. So I don't, the way it is now, that will not address the problem that we've been raising about Limestone Road. My other point is broader, and it kind of gets at what others have been saying. I agree that the township has not, I'll say it, you've not tried hard enough to get enough input from residents. These meetings are great. People don't come. I come, I get bombarded when I go back home. I go for a walk in the morning. Everybody's stopping me. What went on? Why is this happening? What's going on? I can't explain it to them. Why don't you go out into the community and talk to people? You could take our clubhouse and you get our whole community in there listening. You could go to Somerset Lake Clubhouse. People would come to listen. When they're sitting home and you're there, they're going to come and listen. They're not going to come here. And they don't read your website. Everything's on the website. It's primarily a passive communication. You're relying on us to look things up and get the information we need. I believe the zoning project is the right thing to do. Don't get me wrong. I think staying ahead of zoning issues is the right thing to do, but it's being totally misunderstood. People see houses, they say, oh my God, tomorrow we're going to have 500 houses next door. They see a stadium, they say, oh my God, what does this mean? You've got to get out there and talk to people, or this is all gonna, you're just gonna have nothing but trouble from now on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Stan Lukoff, 283 Reynolds Road, longtime township resident. So I had communicated with Samantha a few months ago about this. My concern tonight that I'm addressing is around the lighting ordinance in both the updated zoning proposal as well as I want to tie that into the Saldo also and understand the difference between the two. So when I talked to Samantha a while ago, I wanted to make sure that the lighting ordinances were updated to reflect the current state of the art in terms of dark sky compliant ordinances that many townships and municipalities are implementing. So I wanted to understand, I did see, Samantha, when I downloaded the draft on the website, there was, lighting ordinance in there, and I wanted to understand if the changes in that section has been reflected to, versus the old version of the lighting ordinances, and if they've in fact reflected the most of the dark sky ordinance components, and if anything, in fact, was not put in the lighting ordinance that is part of the dark sky ordinances. Do you want to address that?
So with, since we were doing a comprehensive review of your zoning ordinance, kind of the direction that we were given by the task force, by staff, by the board was, apply the best practices. Don't be bogged down by the existing text, because this was written a really long time ago. So we did, start kind of fresh with all the articles. And that's kind of what we're trying to do right now with the historic preservation article, which I had mentioned earlier. We do consult with the dark sky model ordinance, and then work with municipalities to modify it according to what their needs are, what they want to see. Right now, I don't know the dark sky model ordinance that in depth to know like the intricate differences. But the text that's in the April 2025 version of the draft ordinance is the proposed text for that we incorporated dark sky principles into. I'll also note that we do have a task force member who is really passionate about this issue, and actually reached out to someone in Massachusetts who had really good diagrams about what unshielded light fixtures versus shielded light fixtures look like, and got permission to use their graphics. So that has been an issue that we've included, and it's defined in the definitions as well. However, if you take a look at the lighting ordinance, and there's anything specific, if you're familiar with the dark sky that wasn't included, we could look into it, and I can assure you that there's probably a reason why or why not it was included. Because what we were balancing was, dark sky, but also safety, and then also kind of burden on property owners. So we were balancing a lot of different things, especially like commercial property owners.
Okay. So can you also address, Samantha, or maybe somebody on the board can address this? There's also in the Saldo a component also for lighting, because I remember seeing years ago, like lighting fixtures actually. And I'm wondering, does that need to be updated as the zoning lighting ordinance is updated? Because in my opinion, when I saw those lighting fixtures, they were not dark sky compliant. So can somebody help address
The lighting fixtures in the current Saldo or
current Saldo?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are in the process of working with the township on updating the Saldo, similarly to the zoning ordinance with kind of best practices and standards. But then also a big component of it is making sure that it speaks back and forth with the zoning.
So is that a separate project, or is that related to the zoning project? Separate project.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
But we will be looking at what the zoning ordinance says and making sure it
Okay,
jives.
thank you. I appreciate that. And obviously with the potential White Clay Point development, this is very much a concern of mine and also residents adjacent to me. So thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Patty Bodie on Walnut Run. I probably should have come before Barkley. But anyway, I want to ask about the Enterprise District. I don't understand why you can't extend it down below Star Road because the properties already belong to a mushroom company. You already have a mechanic there and a kennel and that kind of thing. So is there a particular reason you can't expand it down? And also, is it because it would run into the stream or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about kind of the discussion that we had with the task force. So, and I think it was on an earlier slide, but we were looking at a lot of factors. So yes, you're right. There is an existing non-conforming use that would be permitted, in the enterprise district and able to expand, beyond 25% if it was in the enterprise district. That use will still be able to continue as a non-conforming use, regardless of whether it's in the enterprise district or not. We felt like that Star Road was really the dividing line between more intense uses in the north and also where infrastructure was, compared to the south, where you have more natural resources. It is primarily residential in nature. And we felt like that Star Road was a defensible dividing line.
That little piece of block. Okay. So then you have the 5 lots up at the top. You see where there's Runway Drive? Okay, that's also Enterprise for those 5 lots. I thought we just had a conditional use hearing that made them residential. Right, no, so are you just changing it back because it's called industrial lane. It made sense for it to be industrial. I'm just curious, we just spent all that money to have the conditional use hearing.
Mhm.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I don't remember which conditional use that was.
Zoning hearing.
Yeah,
zoning hearing board, yeah, they had a conditional use hearing.
well, conditional use is board of.
Or I'm
Supervisors.
sorry, I'm using the wrong word, whatever the word is.
Zoning hearing board.
The
okay.
lawyer comes, they have the guy take notes, the whole thing.
It was a
Okay,
zoning hearing.
they just did that. So now, instead of being residential, it's now going to go back to industrial lane with
Yeah.
innovation.
It was before, I'm sorry, I don't really remember because I don't do that work, but
No, it's the other.
if they got a variance to do that, or they went before the ZHB for special exception relief, that wouldn't change the zoning, and it would just be particular to that one property owner or that one request.
Well,
Doesn't
it's-
change the
it's just
zoning for a
5 lots.
district.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
just saying you can change that with this new zoning, correct? Okay. My last question is, what happens to all the people that are in residential that do have farms? Okay, we're not doing mushroom farms. There's horse farms, there's goats, there's people that just want to live on their 10 acres and have a nice time. Okay, what happens to those people? And all the people that have mushroom houses all interspersed through it out. Okay. I realize nobody really wants to live next to a big industrial, but a lot of them are not that bad.
So in the current iteration of the draft zoning ordinance, there are different types of agricultural uses. So we break out crop farming, raising of livestock. There is a separate use for equine activities. There's also accessory uses to a principal use. So if you have a few horses and, it's not really a principal use, it's an accessory use to your house, that would be permitted in the residential low density. Crop farming, crop storage are currently permitted by right in the proposed zoning ordinance. Right now, that raising of livestock, we have a special exception. I think we noted earlier. However, that is something that the Planning Commission asked us to review to see if it might be more appropriate to have that as permitted by right. However, the kind of industrial grade mushroom operations type of agriculture have different impacts than those types of agricultural uses. So that's why we are looking trying to regulate them
More of that.
in a different, yeah.
I appreciate this. I went to all those summer budget meetings. I knew this was coming. I know it needs to get done. And I realized that not everything up there is going to be developed. It's a little confusing to have the discussion about White Clay Point and the stadium and this at the same time. And my last question is, when is the results of the community survey coming out? Because I think that would make a difference.
Yes, thank you. We actually just got the first report back today, so the plan is to have that at the next meeting, and the consultant or the vendor, excuse me, will provide like a summary report at the very beginning for public presentation. We're also working now internally to review those to structure into kind of like a performance plan for budgeting purposes, to kind of say this is the feedback, this is where we need to focus on. And so the goal is now to kind of build that like performance-based kind of budgeting ecosystem. So we're getting in this as well and everything. But yes, that's coming forward here soon to a theater near you. And just to kind of clarify, we said it last week, and maybe not some of the people were in the room then. This is independent of the auspice of zoning under the review for White Clay Point. That's the existing zoning for White Clay. They're undergoing the Unified Development District, not for this. So this is future facing, that is like existing now, current today, just to clarify that as well.
Hello, my name is Vincent Mancino. I live at Harlow Point Court. We'll get into that one thing. One of the things that was not mentioned during the feedback was the environment. Okay, so the two things that I saw on there were traffic and housing prices. And then there was a positive that someone wanted more stores, small stores, but nothing was mentioned about the environment on that one. And the thing that I don't like is when she talks about housing types, I heard the word everything. Okay, so everything to me means that they could put anything they want anywhere they want. And I hope the board thinks about the price value of the houses that are existing versus the new housing that comes in, because when new housing comes in, the rule is that the old housing prices go down. So a lot of people might want to come in and reevaluate their taxes, which would bring the revenue down to the existing houses that are already here. So that's something that I would like you all to consider, because coming in, I would rather buy a brand new house than a house that's 8 years old, correct? All right, so it's just something that I don't like. And again, to this woman's point, the by right must have been said 7 times tonight, okay? And that by right, again, makes me cringe every time I hear it, because it doesn't, and as she said, it almost feels like the total control of the board is taken away, because the by right is almost like, hey, here's my chip, I get to do anything I want. So I understand the logic that you were talking, you're an attorney, but again, remember the people that live here, okay? This place is a pristine place. We don't want to see 600 houses across the street from us of mixed use, which we don't even have a picture of. And again, at the next presentation, it'd be nice to have a pointer to see where she's talking about. It's one thing to hear someone, but it's another thing to look at exactly where the situation is going to happen, especially since I live in Limestone and Southwood. Okay, so that's another, just a suggestion. Thank you.
Chris, would it be helpful to, I was wondering if it'd be helpful to go through, and maybe not tonight, I know we're going to reserve this for the public, but the existing uses in the UDZ are really, and they're not that far off from the Innovation District. And Patty, to your point on the existing farms, I have a meeting with Samantha and trying to get a better handle on those. And I think they need to be documented if they're going to become non-conforming. And like we did with the Natural Resource Protection Ordinance, it should be done within a year, that documentation, so that they reserve that right to continue their use that they've had for many, many years. That's all.
I just want to interject to follow up on this point. Would it be possible for you guys to do something to kind of illustrate the restrictions that are going to be in? Because I think a lot of people do hear use by right, and they, like you said, assumes it can be, 7, 8, 9, 10 stories. So if there's something you could have like a visual, I think you had at one point of kind of like a suggested streetscapes visuals.
Yes. So we can do a couple things to to illustrate kind of dimensional standards, we can do kind of simple diagrams that would show setbacks or height. But during the third public outreach meeting that was really focused on the districts, we did have boards around the room that had kind of illustrations using kind of either vacant parcels or areas of streetscape that might, or of the street that might have vacant parcels. So we showed what like different infill, so development that's happening in between existing development, what that could look like. So that is on the website. Those boards are on the website. Next time I come to speak, I'm happy to feature them in the presentation, but we can also incorporate not the sketches, but definitely diagrams into the ordinances as well. The sketches are more like illustrative purpose, whereas the diagrams would help someone that's trying to interpret the zoning ordinance understand.
Okay. Yeah, I think that picture you had that kind of showed, you know, density at what 4 units per acre looks like, 12 units, that sort of thing is helpful.
Okay.
In the presentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to further that, in the subdivision and land development process, they'll have to comply with the standards in that provision, even if it is a use by right. Correct?
Absolutely. So yes.
And the natural resource ordinance, as well as the stormwater ordinance, we're not waiving or changing anything of any content there. I think there's some redundant terms that we may be losing. So there still is a lot to that you would have to go in. It's not like
A
you
free
come
for all.
in,
There's
say,
oversight.
oh, I want to build the gas station. Or I want to build, 50 houses.
Yes.
So there still is a process.
So, and something you had mentioned earlier that the document's 432 pages. And the reason for that is because we have really beefed up your supplemental use regulations. So for those uses that you want to regulate a certain way in terms of, where the distance between, just trying to think of something. Maybe there's a certain use that shouldn't be a certain distance or a certain distance away from a school, right? That's a certain supplemental use regulation that applies to a certain use. So that's included. If it's a drive-through like facility, what does that, where is the drive-through in relation to the entrance and or the street? Where does the parking go? So there's a lot of supplemental use regulations that are unique to the use, but even for a use that doesn't have supplemental use regulations, there are still a lot of other parts of the zoning ordinance, including the parking, signage, lighting, natural resources, historic preservation articles, in addition to the other ordinances, SALDO, stormwater, et cetera, that would dictate how something happens.
Hi, my name is Clara Yellow. I live in Hollow Point, and I'm basically going to reiterate Rona, Pete, Denson, and the others, especially along the limestone corridor. We do not want permitted by use. We've already discussed that and have expressed that, but we also feel that we need to keep on saying it over and over again to make sure that it's heard. And that you understand our concerns. We prefer the development by special exception, which will allow for more scrutiny of anything that's developed there. What is it called? The conditional use, we would be okay if it included single homes, maybe a small office building, but nothing huge that would create more activity, noise, etc. on that corner. And that's really it. Again, just to reiterate, to please hear us and understand our concerns, quality of life. We want peace. We want, not a lot of traffic, etc. The other question I had was, Samantha had mentioned there's a task force meeting on August 7th. Is that correct? Who is part of that task force? How many of the developments in our area representatives will be included in that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, and we should probably keep like a constant slide of who's on the task force in the actual presentations if you help. It's not as taboo secret. They were appointed at a public meeting last year. It's commensurate of the Vision Partnership Program grant. This is why we have to have a task force, because the county is paying for half of this consulting project. And so that kind of was, we had to establish this like deliberate body that serves as that, like, you know, what we've all seen here is just like that function of reviewing all of the kind of depth of details, going over with the kind of very scrutiny, kind of look at everything and preparing these materials for public meetings. And so usually the only deliberate body that prepares a zoning ordinance recommendation change per the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code is the Planning Commission. So the goal was to align the Planning Commission membership with the task force membership, because this is what they do and they've been providing support for as long as they've been serving on the Planning Commission. So the chairman of the Planning Commission, Jeff Hazelwood, is on the task force. Chris McLennan, the vice chairman, a woman, excuse me, is on the task force. Sam Stanton, who's been on the Planning Commission, also serves on, is he on open space as well? Okay.
But he has experience.
But he has experience with that as well. And Don Morgan as well. And they're all members of the Planning Commission. And then Mark Tracy, the CFO of kind of Consolidated School District, serves on the task force, as well as we have a AICP certified person. He's probably in the room. I don't know if I want to kind of dime you out a little bit, Tom, but Tom has been at other workshop meetings. He lives in historic Landenberg Village area. He serves on the task force. And then we have, I'm trying to remember the last person off the top of my head. Mike Murphy, who represents kind of the business and industry kind of thing, who works for Ecolabs. So those are the groups that have been providing a very, I would consider to be professional set of recommendations in conference and discussions with Michael Baker throughout the course of this entire project.
So I'm hearing a lot of names, many of which I'm not familiar with.
Yes.
Some of the planning committee, I am familiar with those. I just want to make sure that, I'm not sure what their, do they have a stamp of final approval just on the plans?
No, only the Board of Supervisors has the, so.
Basically, my question and my concern is stakeholders, people who are actually affected personally by these changes. I would just like to make sure or request that they are part of this. Like, I don't know where anybody lives on the board, except for maybe one of you. I'm not sure if any of these changes affect any of you. And if they don't, or the majority of you, they don't, let's say, then something needs to change. We need to make sure that we have proper representation of people making these decisions that are actually understand the actual impact and pain of bad decisions. That's what I'm requesting. And I'm sure we all feel like that. So thank you.
You guys want to do a roll call of where you all live? You want to do a roll call of where you live?
Good evening. I'm Diane Sawson, 21-year resident at Candlewick.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'll wait. Thank
There you
you.
go.
Diane Sawson, resident, 21 years at Candlewick. I have a question, Samantha, maybe you can help clarify on the second bullet. I'm not quite sure those terms, village type setting, what that consists of. And then when it says the parcels adjoining the village core does that include all of the residential flex areas?
So I was not there when the comprehensive plan was written, so I don't want to or speak out of turn, but I can explain our interpretation of what it said in the comp plan in terms of village type setting. So when you think about a traditional village, it's walkable. There are a variety of different types of housing, different services and amenities close by. So more of a traditional kind of downtown little Main Street setting compared to say like a single use suburban residential neighborhood. So there's a difference there in terms of the types of uses, the density of uses and the walkability. In terms of parcels adjoining the village core, so the comprehensive plan looked at kind of the area around the Tough Kenneman. So kind of around that village center, that dark red in particular. And then we looked at that goal, but then we also looked at the other goals of the township where that said, hey, we have these other residential districts, R1, R2, R3. And right now those districts are pretty limiting in terms of the types of housing that are permitted. So we looked at both of these things and we thought, okay, the village center, that red area, we are proposing to have that area accommodate a mix of use of housing types as well. But where else within the purely residential areas could be appropriate for a variety of housing types? And we thought that it would be appropriate kind of closer, like in that kind of the heart of the township there between the two corridors, because it's near Tough Kenneman, it's near the mixed use corridors. And when you look at the sewer layer and where that is, there's some existing sewer and it could potentially be expanded there. So those were some of the considerations that went into why we had that expand out from the village center.
Another question on that map. If I can see, I don't know, parks and open space looks like it's dark green. Are there any planned areas within that middle corridor from Tough Kenneman down to, I guess that's Route 41? Is there any open space? I thought at one point in time the township was buying property
I can answer that.
for open
briefly.
space.
The only one that's kind of in the middle kind of area that's kind of probably the biggest concern in the residential flex is the Jones Farm. That has been brought up and nominated as a high priority project for the Open Space Review Board. In terms of just when, it depends on constant interaction between the Open Space Review Board and the owner, which is Peg Jones and Rosamond. They've been longtime residents, probably more than anybody on the road.
Trouble you to point that out where?
Sure, yeah, this big tract of land right here, right off of Bucktoe Road.
Okay.
So that's kind of probably the biggest piece that you can think of in terms of where most people's concerned are. Where are those big tract areas that serve as the possible highest impact potential projects? To a lesser extent in the RF, it is my understanding the Pratt Farm, which kind of has their kind of bifurcated business. They have their farm and then they have the nursery, if you will, on both on Hillendale Road.
Okay. And I just wanted to make a comment. We've lived here 21 years. Before we moved, we smelled the mushroom farms a couple times. It's not that bad. I would not consider it a stench. You smell it once or twice a year, maybe when they're cleaning out wet compost. I support the farmers, the mushroom farmers. They were here before we moved in. I'd like them to be here when we leave. They are the engine that feeds us. The mushroom farmers, I understand, grow 60% of what is sold in the US. When I tell people I'm from Kennett Square area, they know it because of the mushrooms and Longwood Gardens. So, in my opinion, if you don't like the smell, move to the city.
Barclay, do you want to come up? Okay. Okay, we'll stay as long as we need to for you, Barclay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. I'll be brief. I know you've seen my my rather long letter, so I will be brief. And I know we did talk about the area that's of particular interest to my client is that area between Egypt Run Road and Star Road. That area in there, which has been raised as an issue about why isn't that included in the enterprise. And I just, and there are explanations for that. Reasonable people can, of course, disagree. Looking at a map about whether Star Road is a good place for that boundary rather than Egypt Run Road. One of the things that I would just potentially push back on politely is that right there, right where Mr. Himes is pointing, is that there's about 300 acres there 200 of which is under agricultural easement. So when we're talking about planning, these are legislative priorities and legislative decisions, but I would suggest that planning for uses that can never go in certain areas is not particularly good planning. So if we have 200 acres that's under agricultural easement that's connected to the enterprise district, I would suggest that that's a better place for that to go than a residential use, which by law can never be built in that area. So I would push back on that a little bit. I also heard it mentioned that R1, that farming or mushroom farming, or as we sort of cryptically refer to it in the current ordinance, indoor agriculture, is not permitted in the R1 currently. And maybe I misunderstood. It is.
Incorrect.
And maybe I misunderstood as the planned ordinance is. But right now, R1 farming, whether it be mushroom farming or crop farming, is permitted. And it is true that some of them may be non-conforming in terms of the dimensional of the lot size. For instance, it requires 15% or more of coverage. I'm sorry, or less of coverage for that use. But it is a permitted use. So we are making a big change because that R1 in the current map is, and I haven't done the map, but I'm eyeballing it, 65% of the current of the township is under what is currently R1, where that's permitted. So thinking about what is going to present, problems for Mr. Weir and his and his successors about what is permitted and what is not. I realize that there's no perfect solution, but we do feel like that Egypt Run to Star Road area is better suited in purple than in tan. And if the township, if the board is not inclined to agree with that, which is a legislative decision, of course, not necessarily a legal one, perhaps there is some area of compromise given the amount of by right use for agriculture that's being taken away, and perhaps a few more uses can be added to what's permitted in the planned R1. So maybe it's not composting operations, and maybe it's not massive indoor, I think it was termed industrial grade agriculture, but maybe it does permit for soil recycling and things like that. Because if we're permitting fertilizer and the honey wagons to go across crop farming, then I don't think allowing dirt to be spread on dirt is out of the question. So I appreciate your time. I'm sure I'll be in touch again with more letters, but I do appreciate, and so does my client, the time to speak with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I just want a quick clarification. So they're in R1, so that assumes, so they can no longer expand their operation because it's a no longer conforming use. Is that's what in the proposed ordinance?
If it's pre-existing non-conforming use, they can expand it by 35% as a special exception.
Okay.
But that's, aside from that, they'd have to seek variance relief, yeah.
They've done that in the past, correct?
At least.
I mean, we certainly do have.
I mean, that's something, just to be clear, that's something that they've specifically done in the past, expanded by 35% as permitted by.
Yeah.
Right.
When they initially purchased it, right?
No, I mean, it was just a few years ago, I think.
No,
we
so-
voted on this.
Yeah, correct. So when they
Right.
bought the adjacent property, they removed the setback from the adjacent property and expanded the area that was utilized for use of agriculture.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Beverly Geller. I've lived on Fernwood Drive for 25 years. That's just off of Bucktoe Road. And I had first of all, a quick question for Samantha regarding the task force. Was there a meeting last week of the task force?
No.
Okay. I had seen somewhere that there was supposed to be a July 23rd meeting. Did that? No?
The
Okay.
If I could,
planning commission meeting, right? Sorry.
We were planning to meet in July, on July 27th. However, it was really important for this to happen first. So we moved it to August 7th. And that's the date.
Okay, so the last meeting was April 23rd? Okay. I'm curious if you could explain to us how those of us who submitted comments after the public outreach meeting number 4, which was in May, how those comments have been reviewed by the task force and discussed if there's not been a meeting of the task force since that time. Because I see tonight, and I saw when you presented to the Planning Commission in the interim, that the task force has chosen not to make recommendations based on the comments at this time. But I don't see when you've had a chance to discuss those comments. Could you just explain the process of how information is being reviewed?
Absolutely. So first of all, just to clarify, those recommendations were not recommendations from the task force. It was like our recommendations to set up a conversation with the board tonight. So just based on everything we've heard, this is what the consultant team would be recommending, because sometimes it's easier to react to something rather than to just speak off the cuff. So those are not the task force recommendations. You're correct. The task force has not met since April. So the last time they met was when we put out the draft ordinance and map. And then we've had these kind of 3 meetings. So in May, it was like a public outreach meeting where we got a lot of feedback. Planning Commission last month. And then this is kind of our 3rd and final meeting for the draft ordinance. So that our August meeting with the task force is taking all this comment, public, Planning Commission and board, and taking it to them for incorporation into a final draft. Our decision to do that was honestly purely logistical and to help with communication. As was said tonight, this can get really complicated really quick, and it's really hard to manage multiple versions of a 432-page document. So our goal was to collect all the information, have it all compiled so that the task force can incorporate that into one final draft plan.
Okay, so will we have an opportunity to find out, based on your discussion in the next meeting in August, what changes, if any, you are recommending to the draft plan?
So the task force meeting will be recorded and will be on the website by the end of the next day. So by end of day, August 8th. So you can hear the whole conversation and the slide deck or meeting summary. And then kind of how they incorporate comments will be in the final draft plan. So we will plan to use comments and highlights and track changes in the document so you can see what changes have been made in the final draft plan.
Thank you.
By popular demand.
I really respect all of you, honest to God. I sit there at one time. I'm sorry I'm full of emotion. The lawyers, they can handle it well. I can't. I'm too emotional, but I'm almost there. And I think you understand my position. I don't want to overdo it. I'd like to say, the other thing I'd like to say along, I said agricultural to meet with all of you. I'd like to see Mark Tracy come out to all of us in the township and present the view down the road of the school district and the needs. We're one portion of it. I think it's Township, Kennett Burr, Independent One, New Garden. I'd like to see how it all fits together. I'm just beginning to learn about children. Families aren't having as many children. The demographics are changing more than we ever realized. I'd like to hear. Honestly, that I'm giving as a recommendation, that's all. The other thing that really concerns me, and I'm not a lawyer, is what grandfathering really means. How permanent is it? How short-term is it? Same way with non-conventional. First, when I looked at non-conventional or non-conforming, it's almost personal. I thought of as a negative. The next morning I thought, non-conforming, we're really unique. So that's what I'm going to keep people. Those that are in nonconforming are unique, very unique. So thank you. And the other thing, the lady was here, she's gone. It just came on my mind after listening to that task force meeting at 2, whatever, second month. I don't know whether any of you ever remember the movie of 1965, Those Callaways. Any of you watch it, Disney? I'm going to ask you to do it. Take your family. It's a family movie. It's a family movie, Those Callaways from 1965, and it'll put tears in your eyes because my girlfriend had them. I don't know if she's still there. I didn't. She came over and watched it with me, you know? So Those Callaways, there is a little message in there. And I really respect you. Thank you for listening to me. I'd like to work with you, honestly. I'm not really adversarial. I got a real stake in it. Thank you. Thank you. Truly.
Thank you, Barclay.
Anybody else like to speak?
Melissa Barrier, I live in Somerset Lake. There's been talk of all of this, and I'm just curious, I can't remember what we said last week, but is the Route 41 going to be made larger, or what's going to happen with that? Because that, when I drive it, I'm like, oh, where are all these people going to go? How are you going to do that? There's a lot of things that are right up against 41, so I'm just curious how that's going to happen. Thank you.
I mean, just off the top of the head, the planned improvements for White Clay will be commensurate of the traffic impact study that shows the net yielded kind of impact that they will have to be responsible for doing for on-site improvements on Route 41. Just as a nature of the beast in Pennsylvania, developers are only legally required for their on-site improvements. You can't force them to really do outside of that, say for just amenability and a proffer or contribution. Outside of that, there is a larger kind of, I'll call it corridor study result that came from another VPP grant that was participated upon by, I think it was started at Londonderry and they kind of went all the way down to the Delaware state line. So it's the Route 41 corridor study. That is more of a usage of that as a function of getting PennDOT to the table to start talking about addressing the needs kind of comprehensively, not just on kind of like an iterative build out function just in New Garden. Because it's not just our problem. We share that with Avondale Borough. We share that with London Grove. Their growth plans. I know that there is development plan for north part of the interchange area around Route 1 in London Grove. So it's going to be just a whole pot of contributions to that issue. And ultimately, PennDOT is kind of the gatekeeper for that because it's their road. So I think the VPP study, what showed kind of what all those kind of incremental improvements would likely be based off of what that net output would look like. That's also a legislative function. It's calling your state senators and representatives, getting their attention to it. It's kind of like a community driver. If you want to see improvements on Route 41, you need to make it like a holistic issue from the ground up. So there's like a grassroots campaign. Otherwise, the township is just getting its kind of studies to them and saying this is what we want to focus on, but it's that legislative piece that really adds force to it as well to get them to kind of move faster than they have been in the past, where I think from start to finish, the intersection project for Baltimore Pike was like 25 years ago that kind of started, and they're just now getting to it. So it's just, you gotta push from all ends, if that makes sense. Same thing for the interchange on Route 7 and 41.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, and thanks for being part of this important process. Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
None.
We
Samantha?
Thank you.
It's not. Oh, they're playing here. Because it needs a play. Yeah.
I have got a reflex stop.
Well, I'll keep my thoughts. What you guys can say. I'll send you.
What's that? You can send me comments.
Yeah, I'll send.
Well, actually, you're.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, it's not a culture.
That's one, you saw that. Look at. So. Well,